Yo, guys, it's Old Man G. Oops, sorry about that. It's Old Man G here, back again. And I'm joined by the amazing Tom, the journalist. We've obviously got some, well, it's not breaking, but obviously some really important news to discuss regarding Manchester United. Obviously, as you can see, Omar Berrada, Manchester United's new CEO. I mean, the controversial thing is obviously that he was obviously involved with Manchester City. But before we get into it, guys, remember, if you are new to the channel, to like, share, and subscribe to Red Devil Studio. Follow us on Twitter and X and smash the notification button. But like I said, I'm joined by Tom. Tom, buddy, how you doing? Long time no see.
Yeah, no worries. And yeah, thanks for having me back on, as always. And yeah, we're going to provide some bit of insight for everybody about the announcement anyway, and a couple of other things that have happened through the week and everything. But listen, everybody, busy schedules. G's busy, myself's busy. So the least you can do, guys, on your way in, like, share the video, subscribe. It's the least you can do. And yeah, we'll try and put on a good show for you all.
Appreciate it, man, Tom. Thank you for being on the channel. I really appreciate it. So, I mean, first of all, what I'll do is I guess I give us a context, because Manchester United actually have confirmed on the website, and I'll just kind of read the statement out now. So it says Omar Berrada appointed as new CEO. Manchester United is pleased to announce the appointment of Omar Berrada as its new CEO. The club is determined to put football and performance on the pitch back at the heart of everything we do. Omar's appointment represents the first step on this journey. As one of the most experienced football executives at the top of European football, Omar brings a wealth of football and commercial, because obviously that's the main reason, let's be real, expertise, with a proven record of successful leadership and passion to help lead change across the club. He is currently serving as Chief Footballing Operations Officer for City Football Group, overseeing 11 clubs across 5 continents, and prior to this, he held senior roles at Barcelona. It is our state's ambition to re-establish Manchester United as a title-winning club. We are pleased that Omar will be joining us to help achieve this goal, so that once again, United fans, in the words of Sir Matt Busby, the red flag flying high at the sum of English, European, and world football. Omar's start date will be confirmed in due course. In the meantime, Patrick Stewart will continue as interim CEO. And that's United's statement right there. And you know, this is massive potentially. This is massive. But I mean, first things first, you know, I'll just quickly read some comments before I go to Tom, because obviously Giles says United have just got one of the best CEOs we could get. We have stolen City CEO Berrada. It says Joe Bessie, what about the 160 charges? Okay, so that's another angle. The 116 charges, he was there. So let's talk about that. City are getting ready to give league to improve the charges. The lawyer says league will have the City. Well, that again, will see what happens. Mowadas is big up Mowadas and Tom. Let's hope this is another false dawn. Question: what will Sir Brailsford's role be? Again, we'll talk about that. Tom is here. Big up AD, how you doing? And obviously, big up Mustafa. Markov says Omar was chief officer at City. Omar helped City to get the Haaland deal over the line. Okay, so Tom, obviously, because obviously you're more in the know than ourselves. What I think the first question is what, because people don't know, Manchester don't really know what Omar Berrada does, what he did, what his background is. Can you give us a bit of an insight into who he was, what he's done, and then talk about like what you think he can do for Manchester City, etc.
Yeah, well, in terms of his body of work, as far as I was aware anyway, he spent 8 years at FC Barcelona. He started off as it was something to do with the social media and marketing team at Barcelona, and he worked his way through the ranks to then get onto the hierarchy of the board. And he was a board member at Barcelona and on the directors for Barcelona. And he was a part of that sort of connection trio that they currently have at Manchester City, where you had Pep Guardiola, the manager. Omar Berrada was one of the directors. Soriano was there, and Tixi Bernstein was there. So, if you like, the trio of them were all in that pyramid at Manchester City. So that's gone to Manchester City from Barcelona. He spent 8 years at Barcelona, and then upon transition, it was in 2011 that I can't remember if he left Barcelona. He resigned from his role, and he moved to Manchester City. He moved to Manchester with his family. He had a young family at the time, 2011. He went there. He went to Manchester City and he joined. I think it was a sort of similar role again in terms of the marketing and the sponsorship department for Manchester City, and then he built his way through the ranks to not necessarily the CEO, but the way Manchester City's structure is internally inside the football club is complex, and they have what you call a CEO, which is Soriano. You have Khalidun Mubarak, which is the CEO above him, leading for the ownership, almost on behalf of the whole club. Soriano leads the City Football Group, which, again, as you pointed out in that statement, the 11 football clubs over 5 continents. And you had, in terms of Omar Berrada, his role in that City Football Group was he was the chief footballing officer. And what that role entails, he was more based upon the football operations, but from a business exercise, if you like. He worked hand in hand with Tixi Berenstein, which was the football director. And what his basic role in Manchester City's progression was, Tixi found the players, the recruitment, along with his recruitment team. They take him into a meeting with Omar Berrada, and Omar Berrada breaks down the details and the finances of how much each player would cost, how much it would impact the football club's finances going forward, the wage salary structure around giving players certain contracts. Contract renewals always went through Omar Berrada at Manchester City. The most recent ones being in the likes of Kevin De Bruyne, who signed a new deal. Kyle Walker as well, I think, is either on the verge of signing a new contract at Manchester City or is in negotiations to. He's going through Omar Berrada. And the sort of myth that's been put out there around Manchester United, and I guess this is more of what he can bring to Manchester United, is that John Murtough, Richard Howard and Ed Woodward, in terms of executives in football, they were never well-known people. They were never football people or experts in that case. And the one thing that's been slung at John Murtough, especially in terms of the footballing department, which this guy has experience of, as I say, working hand in hand with a sporting director in Tixi Berenstein, is that he effectively has the black book to world football. And what I mean by that is every single sporting agent, football executives, even if you want to go from, liaisons at football clubs, player agents, lawyers, he's got all the contacts within world football. If Manchester United want to sign a player from any football club, Omar Berrada has the contacts in place to make a deal happen with any football club in the world. John Murtough's one is a little bit more complex because he's new to the role. He's not been a senior executive in a football club really ever since his time at Everton, which was about 6 or 7 years ago, ever since that he joined with David Moyes to Manchester United. So the guy comes with a lot of background. He comes with 19 years experience within football operations. I think it's a key point to say. And I guess the final sort of header point for the guy is he's been massively successful in 2 football clubs. Everywhere where he's been in terms of an executive or he's had an influence in, he's been effective. He was effective in that Barcelona team for many years. Fast-flowing, fluid football under Pep Guardiola that won them the Champions League medals and won them all the trophies that they had in that era. And he's been a part of the dynasty at Manchester City since 2011. So even before Pep Guardiola went there, he's basically created a history for Manchester City along with the other executives that are there. So a lot of Manchester City's success you can pin towards this guy, but you can also pin it towards a lot of those members in that group. And the one thing that I know, especially for Manchester City, is they are very disappointed that he's decided to leave them to go to Manchester United, as I think it would be vice versa if it was Manchester United to Manchester City. But the reasoning behind why they're disappointed is they believe that Omar Berrada, should Tixi Berenstein decide to stand down as sporting director in Manchester City's football group, as it had been sort of put out there into the media that he was looking at potentially moving on or taking a sabbatical away from football, Omar Berrada was going to step into the sporting director role at Manchester City. So I think it puts a different estimation in place of that. You have a guy who Manchester City is one of the well-run football clubs and most, arguably people would say the best football club in the world right now, if Tixi Berenstein, their sporting director, going to leave, was going to put this guy in charge of their football operations. I think it shows if they have that major trust in him, and the word that's always been slung at Manchester United has always been they don't sign the best in class. OMAR BERRADA as a CEO, as a football director, as a chief footballing officer, in any of those roles in terms of a club structure, he fits the bill as best in class. And I can't remember who put the comment up around that Manchester United have got one of the best CEOs in world football.
Yeah.
They have. And they've managed to pinch them from their nearest rivals in Manchester City, which says something.
Thanks for that. Thanks for Tom, and I appreciate it. Let me just quickly go into. I think there's 1-2 questions. So I think the first one, what I was saying, obviously, Hogan on Post says, "What will Sir Brailsford's role be then?"
Sir Dave Brailsford's role.
Yes.
Yeah, in terms of Sir Dave Brailsford's role, what he is currently doing right now, he's doing a 3-month audit of Manchester United's footballing operations internally inside the football club. And effectively, Sir Dave he's a high performance. How can I say? He's a high performance expert. He knows what's right in sport and what's not right. And he's not. I'll be honest, and he'll be the first to admit himself anyway in interviews. He's not a football expert, but he knows how to get the best out of sports athletes, and he knows what's the right culture, the right environment, what things need to change to be successful and what doesn't. He's not going to be the CEO of Manchester United, as I said before. He wasn't going to be the sporting director. Effectively, Sir Dave Brailsford's role in Manchester United is very similar to Jean-Claude Blanc. He's an executive. He's going to be a board member at Manchester United, first and foremost, and he's going to sit on the board, but he's also going to be a liaison advisor from the ownership internally to the football club. So, Ineos, for example, if Sir Jim Ratcliffe wants an update on day-to-day operations at Manchester United and what's going on, he will go to Jean-Claude Blanc and Sir Dave Brailsford to know what's going on. Jean-Claude Blanc will come more from the financial background because OMAR BERRADA will have to liaison up to Jean-Claude Blanc and then up to Sir Jim Ratcliffe. And then on the opposite side, if Ratcliffe wants to know what's going on with the football operations, he'll go through Sir Dave Brailsford because he's more of a sports guy. And he's his right-hand man in terms of sports operations within Ineos. And effectively, the appointments and the changes that are being made right now have gone through Sir Dave Brailsford's recommendations, but also, as far as I'm aware, with OMAR BERRADA's appointment as CEO, Jean-Claude Blanc's been massively influential in that, in saying that, look, the Manchester City model is there. You need to pick one of those 4 and tell them to come over. And out of the 4 of them, they've gone with OMAR BERRADA out of the 4 of Soriano, Tixi, Khalidou Mubarak, and then you obviously go forward and you pick which one that you want to try and get. And this guy's chosen and decided that he wants to leave Manchester City and have a new challenge somewhere. But the reason for coming to Manchester United is the influence that he will have as a CEO is far greater than the influence in the role that he had at Manchester City. It wasn't him running Manchester City. He ran it with other people. Whereas he comes to Manchester United and is the CEO, he's the main guy. He's the guy who signs the contracts, the sponsorship deals, the agreements with the ownership, everything. He's the main man.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. RD7 also has said, so is he going to be the one that hires the director of football?
In this instance, no. But as far as I'm aware, he will be consulted on who will be the director of football. The director of football will come from recommendations from Jean-Claude Blanc, from Sir Dave Brailsford internally inside the football club. Obviously, I think OMAR BERRADA will have an influence and will have his own opinion. And I think Ineos would be to hire the guy and then not listen to what he believes is right in terms of getting somebody. But the ultimate final decision will come down to Ineos and Sir Jim Ratcliffe. And if, the reports that have been put out there and behind the scenes is that they want to hire multiple technical directors into Manchester United, they're looking at Paul Mitchell to join the recruitment team and head the recruitment staff. He will be, his role if he came in would effectively be go out there, European football, you set all the scouting networks, you roadmap for young players to come through the academy, you basically run the football operations. And then you could have somebody like a Dan Ashworth from Newcastle come in, be the director of football or technical director who will effectively liaison with players. So if a player signs, that's the guy that you send there with OMAR Berrada to negotiate for the player. If you want to go and get, like you saw when you had Richard Arnold and you had John Myrtle fly up to Barcelona and they were pitched outside restaurants and cafes, sipping coffee and rosé wine, trying to get Frank de Jong, and he never come. But put it this way, I think a lot of Manchester United fans would rather have it where they have the structure that's being proposed, Omar Berrada, and then you bring in, Jean-Claude Blanc into that conversation as well. They're football influencers. They're main people within sport and football. You go to a UEFA conference or anybody, you mentioned those two, either of those two names, they know who they are in football. You go to the conferences as Richard Arnold or Ed Woodward, it's a little bit different because they don't come from a football business background.
Yeah.
But these guys do, and I think for spearheading your football club, you'd rather have Jean-Claude Blanc and Omar Berrada as your two main football business influencers, rather than have Ed Woodward and Richard Arnold influencing your football operations and your decisions. So it's a right step in the right direction, but the only thing that you can say that I guess puts a little bit of a damper down it is the Glazer family still own the football club. So ultimately, any final decision that comes will have to come from above.
And I think, and that's a good point. But this goes on to Atonement's point, which is the key thing is that the management need to give him power to make changes. This appointment is meaningless if he doesn't have power. Same thing, the Arsenal medical doctor, we got, and that's I think the key thing here. Smasio says Manchester doing something right for once. He needs, as I said, time and power to really change United, especially the recruitment structure needs a overhaul. And and like I said, I think that's the key thing really. Like, there's no real point in saying, something is going to change ultimately if the Glazers, and that's why the two reasons why I'm tempered by this whole thing is the first reason is at the end of the day, it's a Glazer appointment, and they're still going to have the final say so. That's the first thing. The second thing, and I guess maybe we'll talk about that sort of now, is the idea of City's charges. And a lot of City fans, a lot of Liverpool fans, and even United fans, to be fair, saying, well, hang on a minute, Manchester City are charged with, all of these charges. And this, guy was obviously involved in a lot of the operations of the club. If they are found guilty, I suspect they won't be because reasons. If they are, this would look really bad on the new, United CEO. So what do you say about that in relation to the charges and stuff like that?
In terms of Manchester City's charges, everybody's seen the quotes and the reports that's come out that there is a date penciled in for Manchester City's hearing, and there'll be a lot of trepidation. There'll be a lot of paperwork documentation that'll go into it, and it'll take some time to come to an adjudication and a verdict on it. But look, you can have 100 of Europe's best lawyers in front of you in the Premier League. Out of those 115 charges, you're not going to clear every single one of them. I'll be shocked if they do. But as far as I was aware, and you don't quote me on this because I'd have to go back through the findings of all the different charges. But I think roughly around about 18 of the charges are severe. They are red line warning charges where it is major fraud, it is major financial implications within football. And sport, it's just not even in football, in sport. If you did it in any sport and you get caught, they'd throw the book at you. That you're not talking about relegations, but you're talking about jail time with the amount of seriousness that goes into those charges. Mainly and predominantly coming down to player salaries, manager salaries, and also sponsorship agreements. And listen, everybody knows the charges around the Etihad deal, and certain players' wages haven't accurately over the timescale been evaluated and actually put on the balance sheet. Mancini was supposedly paid by an Abu Dhabi sports premier club rather than Manchester City. Listen, everybody's heard the stories and you know what the charges amount to. And you can't look at all of that and say that even in this case, we have to be, real, and you have to look at it almost from the outside looking in and say, look, as I said before, that structure at Manchester City has been very successful. Tixi Bernstein, Berrada, Soriano, and Khalidou Mubarak. But I'm sorry, if one of them know that something's that they're fiddling the books, all of them have to know. You can't go through that football club at that high level of fraud and financial irregularities without realising that something's not right. So if one of them know, i.e. Khalidou Mubarak knows that Manchester City effectively, people calling it and phrase it anyway, are cooking the books because he's a major contributor to it, Berrada will have known, Soriano will have known, and Tixi will have known. And if they get found guilty, their reputations are in the mud. They will probably never get a top European job ever again. They won't. And if we face it for what it is, as far as I'm aware, the Premier League are conducting internal investigations into Manchester City financially, but they're also conducting investigations into each and every single senior executive at Manchester City to see if they can prove them guilty, who was more influential than others. And then they'll make individual punishments on all the senior members. So, for example, they might put Khalidou Mubarak on the red list to say, you can never be a CEO within European football or world football again. And they can go to UEFA and put forward the case and say, they've been found guilty. He's the leading guy for it. He'll never operate in football again. Or for say 5-10 years, you can never operate in football. But your reputation's tarnished because you've been a CEO and the finances don't add up in a football club. And you've been successful in that. So your success and your reputation and your CV that you've built for 10 years as a CEO is gone. In the same way that OMAR BERRADA's will be, in the same way that Tixi's will be, in the same way that Soriano will be. They will all be named and shamed.
Yeah.
And if it comes down to it, and Manchester City are found guilty of the charges, and let's just say in hindsight, they are relegated upon what lawyers and legal jurisdiction is stating, the guy's almost jumped ship before before it's sunk, effectively. And he's landed another top European job somewhere else. But the one thing that I don't want to worry Manchester United fans in saying this is, if they are found guilty, you believe me, the Premier League will follow principles and they will punish every single individual inside of that football club. And Omar Berrada will not be an exception to that. He will be punished just as severely as Khalidou Mubarak, Soriano, and Tixi. They will all probably never be able to operate in football for years with the way that it's going, maybe even for life. So I don't want to pipe down this pipe dream of that, listen, you've got a brilliant CEO in world football, absolutely. But if it comes to truth, the only people that will really know how much influence they had if they are found guilty will be themselves, all four of them. They will know who had more influence than others. And they're not going to rat on each other. If one goes down, they're all going to go down. So Omar Berrada, the charges will follow him to Manchester United if Manchester City are found guilty. So, and just to sort of, I guess, give an example of it, in Serie A, you had it with Juventus, where they had the scandals around the finances in their football club. The sporting director under those years, Fabio Paratici, moved from Juventus to Spurs to be their technical director and director of football.
Yep,
he
of
moved
course.
to Spurs. He had one summer window, and at the end of that window, I think it was in and around, I can't remember if it was October or November time, UEFA imposed a football operational regulations ban on him to say that you can't work in football while we investigate. They investigated and they banned him from football operations for 18 months. So he couldn't operate in football. So effectively, he was just a guy at Spurs. He wasn't a football director. He wasn't a director of football. So in the same way with Omar Berrada coming to Manchester United to be the CEO, that would effectively be the same impact. He wouldn't have control. He wouldn't be the CEO. You almost would have to either cut your losses and say, look, you're not going to be Manchester United CEO based upon the findings that we found, or you're going to have to stick it out and potentially wait until his ban's uplifted. But
presumably, I mean, I'd like to think the Glazers aren't that stupid that they haven't put some sort of clause or some sort of contractual agreement down there that says, listen, bro, we know what's going on in Manchester City. If you are found guilty or linked to it, something like that, then we can basically terminate your contract with immediate effect. And
I think I'd be shocked. Yeah, I'd be shocked if they haven't done due diligence on the actual situation. But the only problem with doing due diligence on it, the only person you can talk to in that case is Omar Berrada. because Manchester United will not be able to consult with Manchester City on the case. So, and OMAR BERRADA will be restricted on what he can say and what he can't say. So, the only problem with all that is United can do a due diligence on it, but I'll be very honest, I don't think they would have gone forward and brought this guy in the way that they have, where it's been very discreet. His name's not really been mentioned until today, where it blew up. And effectively, it's almost come out of nowhere. So I think Manchester United have definitely taken their time to assess it. They've looked over the options, and if it comes out that Manchester City are found not guilty, then Manchester City will have, obviously, the financial irregularities that are inside that football club will have been proven not guilty. So Manchester United will have got themselves a world-renowned CEO and executive in their football club, which for Manchester United is a good thing. But in hindsight, you have Manchester City, who are still going to be that dominant wrecking ball force at the top of the league that you've got to knock them off. But the only thing that I'll say, especially from Manchester City's side, is they're very saddened that he has left, because they, as I said before, they made him, in terms of the operations, in charge of 11 football clubs, not just one in Manchester City, 11. Yeah. And he was the football officer for all of them. All 11 of that network. So the guy's been around. The guy's been around the world. He knows what he's doing in terms of running major football clubs. So Manchester City to Manchester United is completely different. Different kettle of fish, because it's a bigger branded club. But he's run a lot more than that.
Even the thing, whatever you said about how City made them, at the end of the day, as you said, they've been run well, regardless of where you think the money comes from and the charges. Now, at the end of the day, to essentially own and run 11 different clubs, I mean, we're seeing, what's happening with Girona, for example, in La Liga. That's part of City Group. It beggars belief that a big brand like Manchester United doesn't have. I mean, I know there's issues with people that make it arguing about owning multiple, but personally for me, I don't have a problem with someone owning multiple clubs, so long as the operations are kept separate. I don't really see the additional reason. But Ed Barrett says, what's his involvement in contracts and transfers history? Can his appointment be for a specific area of expertise?
Well, like I said, to answer that question, Ed, it's more based upon he comes with the whole package. He knows finances in football, but he also knows football operations. And the way that I'd look at it from Ineos's perspective is they put this guy forward to the Glazers and said, this is the guy that we need to go forward with. The Glazers will have looked at him from a financial standpoint and said, yeah, the guy's good because he knows football business. And then from the opposite side, Ineos will have looked at him and thought, the guy knows how to run football operations. He's done it for 11 football clubs in Manchester City's football group. They've got one of the best scouting systems in football, if not the best, to scout young talent all across the world. And in terms of his involvement in contracts and transfer history, this is why I'm getting to the point of where I think he is more involved in the scandal and sort of the charges that it's more likely to believe, because he had a major influence in the Erling Haaland deal, in bringing Erling Haaland to Manchester City. He was a massive contributor in terms of that. He negotiated with Erling Haaland's father around a payment structure for agent fees, but also his father wanted fees in terms of the deal. So he was a major contributor in terms of the negotiating of that. So he effectively is a major contributor in terms of Manchester City's finances, how they distribute them and what they use them for. So all I'm going to say, guys, is that if it does come down that it's proven that City are found guilty of the charges, it won't look good. It won't. No. And from his standpoint especially, it'll look like, well, I dealt with player contracts. Player contracts is a part of some of the charges that are brought against Manchester City. Sponsorship agreements. He wasn't the one who signed the contracts for the sponsorship agreements, but he knows what's going on. So there will be an influence and almost an overview that, well, I knew what was going on, but I condoned it. I was complicit in it, and that's why I say if one of them go down, all of them will go down in Manchester City. They all will, and it will go all the way to the top to Sheikh Mansour as the owner. It will, because it will date that far back in terms of the irregularities. So, in terms of him coming to Manchester United, The one thing that I would say, especially that I think is massively critical for bringing this guy in, is he knows how to control player contracts and wage structure. He did it for Manchester City. Manchester City, I think it was around the first or second year with Pep Guardiola when they started bringing in all those players, and people made jokes about how many fullbacks they're bringing in. They was able to bring in that many fullbacks because of the wage structure that they was giving players. They
Fine.
paid them very little in terms of an upfront payment, but they said, you reach XYZ numbers, say you make 20 appearances in a season, we'll pay you an extra £20,000. If you're an attacker in that field, you get over 10 goals, we'll pay you an extra 4 million, however much, £40,000, something like that. There'll be added bonuses in your contracts. He structures it down very well. And especially in United, where right now they're currently negotiating player contracts, this guy would be perfect to have, because if he didn't feel like that player's worthwhile keeping based upon what you're going to pay them or what you're going to have to pay them to keep them, he will say to the ownership group, no, we don't need this guy. Well, you can go and get someone in Europe for far better. You go to the recruitment team and you can get a player who will cost half as much to have at your football club than having Diogo Dalot, than having Luke Shaw, than having whoever. And then they'll go forward and they'll go to the recruitment team and say, right, recruitment team, find us a left back in European football. Get me 5 names. Make sure the manager's on board with your decision making. And then it'll filter through the ownership, from the ownership down to the manager, in terms of the structure of player recruitment, sponsorship, and also player negotiations or manager negotiations if they're bringing a new coach. But like I say, it comes down to it in terms of he's got the portfolio in the background from all of a football business. So everything to do with a football club, the guy's been there and done it. He's done it for 19 years, so he knows what he's doing.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Tom. A big up with ability for. I think I've seen Twitter, Vicky. So and on Rich's channel, I think. So appreciate you stopping by on the stream. Really appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Omar would have had his solicitor involved with the charges and contact, surely. Yeah, I would imagine so.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that there was I think Terry from quoting a Times article saying that he wasn't involved in his sponsorship things, which is the main issue. So maybe there's something to that. And which was also, I didn't realize that I hadn't subscribed before, but I have, and I hope everyone else has it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Appreciate. Thank you. Welcome to the channel again, Vicky. I really appreciate it. And as Vicky said, if you are watching and you're new, make sure you subscribe and share. Obviously, we have Tom on, who is really knowledgeable in this area, and I really appreciate his time and obviously your time watching. If you have any questions for him regarding the whole process, as well as new issues regarding the takeover, please let us know. And that's Vicky says, Tom, are you still living in Spain?
No, I'm not living in Spain now. I'm currently in Cannes, France right now, but I'm on a business contracts sort of search trip to try and acquire some construction and some construction and development contracts in France. So that's why I'm here anyway, to try and bid for some of those contracts over here. But I live in Sheffield, for people that want to go anyway.
Right. Fair enough. There you go. Ed Barrett says, I see the attraction from a business angle, but I don't like him. The shady side of life is too squinty for me. Again, I'm assuming is that just regarding, the cities, stuff like that. I mean, yeah, I mean, for me, I've always said, well, for starters, the way I've still see is that at the end of the day, anyone with even Richard Arnold and Ed Woodward didn't have any football experience whatsoever. So anyone with a degree of footballing experience is going to, in my opinion, do a better job than those two frauds did. At the end of the day, because at the end of the day, they were bankers first, not footballing experts. They didn't have contacts. And we can see in the way the club has been in the last 10 years or so. The wage structure, like that, giving players 300K a week contracts, signing, Ibrahimovic, big names, which is fine. United need to stay with someone. We need to have a brand. But at the end of the day, you think of the amount of we completely destroyed. You look at City's wage structure; it makes sense. You look at United's wage structure; it's all over the place. No wonder there's disillusionment in all places. Then signing players, for short-term fixes. Okay, get me Ibrahimovic. Okay, fine, get me Ronaldo. Get me Cavani. No real longevity, no real plan to these guys. So if you're telling me that you're going to bring in a CEO who's actually going to, who knows football. Clearly, he's got contacts. It's been nice actually having someone who's actually had experience with Barca and City, and so maybe thinking, right, okay, with the DRF, you can start because I'd like to think we should now start. We should start be looking at you know, for a good example is like, have you seen the amount of players that City have been signing from South America? Straight from South America. And I'm like, I don't get why Manchester, still my scratch my head. I'm like, I don't get why Manchester United can't do that. I'm not saying they're going to do well, but when you look at obviously Julian Alvarez, for example, and a few others, it's like, why is it that, obviously we've got academy players, obviously big up Kobe Mainu, who is arguably Manchester United's best player this season. But, why can't Manchester United be doing stuff like that? I don't get it. So Evan Carpy says, Tom, are the Benzema links to United true, and what's the chances? God forbid. But anyway, I just briefly touch on that because it's nonsense anyway. But what do you think?
Yeah, the Benzema links are not true for anybody that wants to know anyway. The only reason why Benzema's name's been linked with every club from Manchester down to going back to Real Madrid is because he had a brief falling out with the hierarchy at Al Ittihad, based upon that he couldn't make it back from a holiday trip when he was in, I think it was Mauritius, if I was away. He couldn't make it back for the team training sessions the week later because I think there was a plane strike or an airport strike with some of the staff in Mauritius, and he couldn't get a plane back to Saudi Arabia. So they kicked up a fuss and a barmy about it. Benzema, it's not a nice phrase that I like using, but he almost, threw his toys toys out the pram and effectively said, well, if you're going to be like that with me and everything, then I'll go around Europe and my agent will contact people and blah, blah, blah. But it was all effectively media talk. They've repaired the bridges at El Ittihad and he's prepared to stay. So, and I'm not being funny, guys. Let's face facts. How old is he now? Is he 36 or something? 35? The guy's on he earns fucking hell. I dread to think about £700,000 in wages per week. Are you really going to turn down upwards of a double-digit £1 million a year to leave to come to Manchester United?
Jordan Henderson obviously has, but I mean, maybe that's a separate thing. I don't know.
The Henderson thing's more based upon the taxes and that Al Ittihad hadn't actually paid him any of his deferred wages that they'd done. The way that Saudi Arabia clubs structure it, that aren't part of the PAF4, which is Al Hilal, Al Ali, Al Ittihad, and there's one more that I've forgotten about. Anyway, there's 4 of them. Al Ittihad aren't a part of that 4 PAF, but the way that the other Saudi Arabian clubs work in that league is that they pay you a third of your wages per week, and then at the end of the season, the rest of your wages that you haven't been paid at the other two thirds of it, you get paid in a massive lump sum. So Henderson has only been getting paid a third of his wages per week, which I think roughly was on around about £400,000, maybe a little bit shorter than that if you convert it back to pounds. He was getting paid a third of it, which is nowhere near the full amount. So effectively, what he's done is he's cut the losses with Al Ittihad, and he said, I want to leave based upon I didn't realise the structure of the finances that I was going to get paid and how it works with Saudi Arabian football clubs. He's almost gone in there blind, thinking, I'm going to get paid multi-millions and everything, as I think a lot of people assume that he has done. And he's come out of it with egg on his face, and he's basically cut his ties and just said to LA, look, if you're not going to pay me my wages that I'm owed, then I want to leave. And he's gone. And he's gone to Ajax, where the money that he's coming back on now, he doesn't have to pay as much tax because he's not coming back to the UK. Also, he would have lost money because he's not actually been paid it by the Saudi Arabian club anyway. But the UK authorities don't know that. And that's not their problem. It's his problem if he hasn't been paid the money that he was expecting to get paid.
Interesting. Thanks. That clarifies things. I think. Thanks. Fabrizio says, as a United fan, should I be hopeful that success is coming back to our club after this appointment? We'll come to that question towards the end. Actually, I think that's a good question, Fabrizio. But it's almost like fool me once, shame when you fool me twice kind of answer, but we'll come back to that. Do you think Dan Ashworth and Paul Mitchell will follow Omar in? So that's my just a question. What do you think about that, Tom?
Well, if we're basing it off of Ineos, they like both of the guys. They like Paul Mitchell more from a head of recruitment side of things, because his main sort of claim to fame and success, albeit it wasn't with trophy success, in terms of the players that he brought in, was at Spurs, and at Spurs he was head of recruitment. So at Spurs, for example, he brought in a lot of those players that he built that team up with Pochettino. So, for example, he found Heung-min Son from Bayer Leverkusen and said, we have to sign this player. He's out of this world. He's going to be a superstar. Dele Alli was another one, from his contracts all the way back from when his first ever job in football at MK Dons. And he got the contracts back at MK Dons, and he brought in young player Dele Alli. And Dele Alli under Pochettino was a massive success. Because, and you can go down the list of the players. The development to bring Harry Kane from the youth team to the first team, funnily enough, for a lot of people who don't know this, wasn't actually Pochettino's decision. Paul Mitchell said, this kid's too good to play in our academy. He has to play for the first team. And they forced it. Daniel Levy, Paul Mitchell, and there was a couple of executives forced it upon Pochettino to say, you have to use this kid. Because Harry Kane at that time was questioning about his career. If I'm not going to start playing first team football, I'm going to look elsewhere. So they pushed it on him, and you look at the player that Harry Kane has turned out to be to this day. That is predominantly down to an influence of Paul Mitchell as well. So as a head of recruitment guy, he's perfect. If you bring him into that role, he'll find players, he'll build an academy up full of young, talented players. He'll go around Europe, and this theory that, like you were saying before, G, around that Manchester United can't seem to sign players from South America, but Manchester City pluck one out every 5 minutes. That would completely change in an instance. Manchester United would sign players from South America under Paul Mitchell's guidance. He would send scouts to the South American market right now, because he knows the South American market is a massive talent for players. Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, the lot of them. You can find gems from all of those nations in South America. In the same point in case that a lot of players are coming from the Asian markets now. Son, you've had it with Hwang Hee-chan at Wolves, who's having an amazing season. You've had it with Tomiyasu of Japan, who went to Arsenal. So there's a lot of different markets that United aren't reaching, and they haven't reached for many, many years now, even as far back as Shinji Kagawa and Jisun Park, if you want to go that far back, of those sort of markets, that they've not really signed that many players from either of those markets, really. But even Dan Ashworth from this case, all I'm going to say is this, guys, is look, to get Omar Berrada to go from Manchester City, a well-run, successful club, to Manchester United, will take a lot of convincing. You have to come, and people will say, you throw him, a blank check in front of him and say, you can do whatever you want at our football club, he'll come. Some people aren't built like that. And if I'm being honest with you, the body of work that the guy's got, he's not short of a few quid. He'll have made a lot of money from his time in 8 years at Barcelona, and he'll have made a lot of money of his time at Manchester City from 2011 till now, which is, as far as I'm aware, if I do the maths right, 13 years. So over 19 years, I think the guy's got a very successful background, and I think his bank balance is loaded enough. He doesn't need that much more. So in terms of getting him through the door from City to Manchester United is a massive coup. It is. You take any one of those four, top European clubs have tried to do that with Berrada. You had NFL franchises that had been in contact with Manchester City since May last year. They couldn't convince him to move to their sport. They wanted him to be the CEO of one of those big teams. Two top European clubs, as far as I were aware, inquired to Manchester City about him. They said no in a heartbeat. So for Manchester United to steamroll in there with Ineos and Ratcliffe and all these other people, and then just to pull up and say, we want Omar Berrada, and they've got him out of there, it's taken, I'm not being funny, it is a massive, massive success. And all I'm going to say is, if they've managed to do that with someone like Omar Berrada from Manchester City, you can get Dan Ashworth out of Newcastle. You can, because you've just picked one of this chief executives from an Arab state who has all the money in the world, like people say about with Dan Ashworth. He has all the money at his disposal at Saudi Arabia, but who's to say that he's in control of that? Who's to say he can? Who's to say he even signs the players? You don't know this, guys. We don't know what happens behind closed doors. So all I'm going to say is, if you can convince this guy to come from City, you can convince Dan Ashworth to come from Newcastle. And by all means, if Ineos have it their way, right as it stands right now, Paul Mitchell they would want as a head of recruitment, and they want Dan Ashworth to come in as a technical director or a director of football. But effectively, you will have that network where you will have almost a pyramid system, or if you like, the quad system that Manchester City have. You have the influence of the CEO, which would be Omar Berrada. You would have the technical director, director of football in Dan Ashworth, who is almost your Tixie Bernstein. You would have it with Paul Mitchell, who would be your head of recruitment, so more of the player side argument. And then you would put the manager in that case, which might be Eric Ten Hag. Come the end of the season, it might not be. So you will have that quad system that will be in place. And all the different people, Brailsford, Blanc, Ratcliffe, will sit above all four of them. So effectively, the structure for United will have changed on its head completely. And if you bring, especially those three guys in, like every Carp is saying here, Dan Ashworth, Paul Mitchell, and Omar, you bring all three of those guys in, that's sort of a sweep. That's sweeping changes because you've got rid of the CEO, you've got basically rid of the recruitment department because you're saying it's not good enough because you want a new head of that, and you want a new director of football. So you're basically saying that John Murtow is incompetent and he's not a successful director of football. That's sweeping changes. That's people that want to be successful. But whether they are or not, and whether these guys in these different roles will have the influence, is another question. Because unfortunately, and I don't want to put it on a downer again for Manchester United fans, the Glazers still own the football club. So any decision has to go through Joe and Avram, unfortunately, and all the family.
Thanks for that, Tom, man. Really appreciate it, and hopefully everyone, hopefully everyone appreciates it as well. Let's just read some more comments. Who do you think will be the next Man United if that tight? I'm sure it'll be Potter. Can't believe Mourinho went to return again. I mean, we can get into that, but probably I'd say probably keep that in common to another show. I think actually because, especially maybe around the transfer window shows and stuff like that. So, but I hear what you're saying. Vicky says without Paul Mitchell, there would be no Luke Shaw at United. Why is that? Why is that?
Because
again?
he was at Southampton as well.
He was at Southampton.
That is true.
That is true. That is true. I don't know whether that'd be a good thing or a bad thing or not, because I don't know what left back we would have got. You know. But you know, there we go. So, but yeah, interesting fact, Vicky. Thank you for bringing that up. Very interesting. Very interesting. Do you think Qatar will sue the Glazers with a statement? Yes. So actually, that's a good segue actually to talk about Qatar basically and Sheikh Jassim and stuff. So because I was going to go live on the Thursday, but I was just busy with work and a few different things. So, and that was going to be the main focus of this show, amongst other things. And obviously the CEO news came out, so I thought we'd spend most of the time talking about it. You know, with obviously the stuff that was coming out today, Tom. So not today, a few days back. What does this mean for, you know, I know that Sheikh Jassim, I think, and the Qatari are going to be putting something out and saying to want to clarify things, but what ultimately does this mean? Because from the looks of it, it looked like, you know, the filings almost implying that Sheikh Jassim and Qatar were never really serious about purchasing the club if they weren't willing to provide the financial evidence of how they were going to fund the football club, you know. So,
Yeah.
so what say you?
Yeah, in terms of it, the blow up from this is that the FCC filings proclaim anyway in the documents bidder A. For people that don't know anyway, if you look at the documents and you don't realise what it actually is telling you, bidder A, when it ever references bidder A in the documents, that's Sheikh Jassim, that's the Qataris. Bidder A in this case, what they're stating is whenever they bidded and put bids in from the first one to the fifth one, when they was bidding for Manchester United,
Mm.
they never put the proof of funds aside with their bid whenever they bid for Manchester United.
Okay.
That's the consensus, and that's what Manchester United board, the ownership in the Glazer family, and their legal team are saying, and that's what the SEC filings state. The Qataris have come out and they are taking, and Sheikh Jassim in this case, is taking legal advice and representation in his own country, in Qatar, and also from the US, because that's where the SEC filings documents have been released from and are held. He wants to know the legal jurisdiction from the US point of view. And the way that it is that the Qataris, in this case, can sue the Glazers for defamation of their contract, because they had a contract in place to say, if they are right, and the Qataris had a contract to say that we bid, let's say, 4 billion, and we could prove it, and the Qataris are saying that they had check-in ballots from the Qatar National Bank in Qatar, which is the biggest investment bank in their country. It's not QIB, as many people thought, in terms of Qatar Islamic Bank, which is what Sheikh Jassim heads. It's not that. They used the actual national country bank to bid for Manchester United. So when people were saying that there wasn't government influence or there wasn't influence from the country in that bid, I think that clearly states that there was. Because the national bank as a whole for that nation will not put their name to anything that is an individual bid. They don't. It's a government project. And it was almost as if Sheikh Jassim was the stooge who led the bid for them, effectively. Whether he was a Manchester United fan or not, listen, he said that he was. He named the foundation after the class of '92 and everything. We've been there before. But effectively, the Qataris are stating that we bid appropriately. We met the asking price that the family had actually wanted, and that in the filings, in that time when they actually met the bid in the end, they could prove the funds because it came from the Qatari National Bank. And there was your proof of funds. And the family didn't go with that offer. They just didn't select it. That's the Qataris and what they're saying. And in terms of the media backlash, this is now exposed and blown out. Manchester United's board, the Glazers as the ownership and their legal representation, and now have put in the filings that the Qataris didn't prove it, which in terms of a jurisdiction under the SEC filings, for people that don't know what the SEC is, they basically regulate the stocks and the exchange markets, particularly anyway within the US. If you are found to have breached their stock trading markets whenever you put a bid in for a stock, or you do what's called anyway, mostly called anyways a charge, as a federal charge in the US, as insider trading, you can go to prison. You get jail term if you're found guilty of these offences. So what the filings that the family, as the owners, have put in place, if they are wrong, they have massively miscalculated this, because either the Qataris will be proved right, and then the Glazers will be investigated internally by the SEC, or the SEC will have to follow due process if the Glazers are right, and they do conduct an investigation into it on behalf of what Sheikh Jassim's wanting, where he wants an open dialogue. He's prepared to take legal advice. So the guy must be confident in what they've done and his group have done. So if it comes down to it, they're going to look at it and think that, well, we've done everything right in this situation. So why are we the ones that are being, almost stoned in the media, and we're being lobbed at with bricks and mortar, basically, and nobody's really going to back us up in this case because we didn't win the bid. But they claim that they met the asking price. They claim that they could prove that they met the asking price and they had the money ready to go. Their case is that the family just didn't accept that bid for whatever reason. So you can muddy the lines for all that you want, but they said that they had a deal, that they met the asking price. The family just didn't go for it. And the Glazers are saying that they didn't even prove that they could pay for the whole thing. Well, all I'm going to say from that case, and listen, I'm not on either side of the fence here because I don't know the ins and outs of it, because this is just what the filings state. Everything else is under NDA and prohibited. But why would you let people bid 5 times. Ratcliffe bid 4.
Mm-hmm.
You let these people bid 5 times, and each time they've never proved that they could pay for it. I
Yeah,
don't get. I
yeah,
really don't get.
there's
If the
something.
first if the first time, like when you had those delays in those bids, when everybody was sat here at 12 o'clock at night, when they
Mm-hmm.
waited for those bids and they didn't come, people wondering, have they both pulled out? What's going on?
Mm.
You're telling me that you let them go through all these different bidding stages and bidding rounds, but they couldn't prove that
Yeah, no,
they could buy the club.
there's
It just
something
doesn't make
there's something dodgy
sense.
about it. That's what I'm saying. Even when it all came out, people were like, oh yes, guitar. I was thinking, hang on a minute, because as you rightly said, it doesn't make sense. And also, the reality is that Sir Jim, we know, has been confirmed in the summer, had to, not in the summer, towards the end of summer, beginning of August, like he had to restructure his bid and what he was offering. So I believe that if, say, for example, they were considering Sir Jim's bid, for example, but the very fact that he's had to restructure in such a way as to ultimately favor the Glazers makes me think that that quite a bit of what that claim is a bit of malarkey, to be honest. Because I don't think it's a coincidence that somehow, I mean, even I was reading about the fact that the deal where, if the Glazers still want to sell the club in a year, they can. So, and so Jim Ratcliffe can't really do anything about it despite the initial investment. So I just think it's very difficult to say that Qatar, that, as you rightly said, that you let people go for bidding process of how many times, and this person had no proof of funds. On top of that, towards the end of last season, towards the end of the season, it looked like it was pretty much confirmed that Sir Jim was going to be the new owner.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we assumed it was, and there was no talk about restructuring a
I mean,
deal.
gee, I've just thought of it in my head. Anyway. There was the
Mm,
Finnish entrepreneur and businessman Thomas Siliakos when
mm,
he entered the process, when he was putting forward the proposal of a fan
mm,
ownership, where
mm,
he stumps up 3 billion and the
mm,
fans are going to stump up 3 billion.
mm,
But when it come down to it, they never took his bid seriously because he could never prove that he could buy the football club. So they
mm.
never let him bid to buy
Yeah,
the club.
yeah,
But they let the Qataris bid, but they're now saying that they couldn't prove that they had the money
yeah,
to buy it. So
exactly.
you kicked a guy out who couldn't prove it, but you've
Mm,
kept people in who you're
yeah.
now saying also couldn't prove it.
Well, this is what I'm saying. I mean, I always thought to a certain extent that the Glazed were playing one against the other, whether they were trying to play, they're trying to play both against each other, playing Sir Jim Ratcliffe against the Glazers, so against Qatar, so that they wanted Qatar to give them essentially the full, what they wanted was, which was, I don't know, 6.5 billion, 7 billion, whatever it was, and wanting them to give the full thing, and then playing Qatar against the gym, i.e., hey, now we had a situation where we were going to basically give you the club, but now we don't necessarily have to, and you can give us more money for less and less role and less power. So if you don't do that, we're going to go to the Qataris. So the way I just kind of see it is that I think the Glazers just try to play these two camps against each other. The Qataris eventually just basically said, you know what, we're not budging from our thing. That's it. We're walking away. Take it or leave it. Um, and called their bluff. And the Glazers were like, okay, well, that's it. We won't go with you. We'll go with Sir Jim because he's ultimately going to give us more money. That's just what it is. That's what, at least that's what I think it is anyway. But yeah, Tom will be back in 2 minutes. That's fine. You get some comments. Tom will be back in about couple of minutes. Let's just see some comments here. Do 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 do. Here we go. I like the room for business purposes, but I don't like. Oh yeah, shady business much. Business much like I'd accept MJ Levin's return. Oh, I know you're talking about mixed feelings. I'm about silver. I see what you're saying, but the thing is, the difference between that is that we don't know how directly involved this guy was. And also, we don't necessarily know whether what he did was illegal or not. So, we don't until a court of law said so. Or the Premier League investigation concludes, we don't know whether what they did was actually illegal or not, or what they were doing. We don't. But all I know is they ran Manchester United City Football Club as a successful club. That's what I know. Big up Jarvis, man. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for joining us in the chat, buddy. Obviously he's I mean, I've seen Jarvis everywhere today, man. He's doing his thing. He really is doing his thing. So, but thank you for the support, man. Potter looks like leaked to be the new pass manager as he attended the game today. Well, that makes sense. I suspect after that battering, Roy Hodgson is going to be getting sacked soon. I mean, the man needs to retire, though, man. Maybe he came back to this game to top up his pension. I don't know. I'll put Tom's back. Let me just quickly read reading these comments. I think if the Glazers get done for this, could they be forced to sell? I'm not sure. I don't think so. I don't think so. But I asked Tom that. We'll finish that. Jarvis says 8 years as a senior media business development manager and as head of sponsorship at Barcelona. Omar's expertise in sponsorship and media rights, and he has a track record in negotiating complex and innovative partnerships with leading brands and companies. Sounds like he's spot on for the Glazers. Yeah, well, there you go. Well, there you go. There you go. There you go. There you go. Here we go. Tom, with 11 months and 54 lawyers at the Rain Group, none of them fought to request. Yeah. Yeah. I think something is dodge, man. Something is very, 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 very dodgy. I'll be honest. I think someone's smoking some BS, and I don't think it's coming from either the Sajim or Qatari camp. I think that this is a sort of a trying to save face situation, because I suspect at some point Qatar were going to be able to tell their side of stories to how things were going to happen, and the Glazers maybe wanted to get to the front of the queue with what they wanted. That's the only thing I can think of. Nevin Carpy says, the great thing is getting the best staff in place, starting the rebuild. The only thing is the Glazers are still there, benefiting from if United is successful, then they could try. I mean, the reality is that you could have had a situation where Sir Jim had gotten the club after the FA Cup final.
Mm-hmm.
There'd have been none of this whole Sir Jim versus Qatar. You'd be like, okay, this is what it is. Sir Jim, they give it to Sir Jim. Sir Jim gets these people over the summer transfer window, and we can start to, and we have at least a good month or so before the club where we can make some key signings and start to build and look forward. Now, this season, in my opinion, is effectively a write-off. It is a write-off. It's a write-off, because we don't know. We're sort of in a transition period where we're getting used to staff, people, players, managers, coaching staff, all the rest of it is being assessed. A lot of people's jobs online, and I think that creates a culture of anxiety and stability. I don't think United are going to get top 5, let alone top 4. So, and I suspect if Ten Hag doesn't get the top 5, he's going to be sacked. So it's essentially a write-off. So essentially, we're thinking that the reality is that United are going to be kicking off from next season. That's basically where we are. Omar favorite saying is making the Manchester City the new Disney is what would have sold the Glazers. So yeah, I guess because we begin to ground up. So final thoughts. Thoughts about what you think. I guess what do you think the ultimate outcome of this whole Qatar, these Qatari revelations are? What do you think like the outcome is going to be with this, Tom?
I think if they're going down the legal action route, then they're going to follow it all the way through, and they will sue Manchester United. They'll probably sue the SEC for false findings, and they'll take it as far as they want to take it at the end of the day. And the only thing that I'm going to say for on the Glazers aspect is, if they sue the Glazers and they win the claim, I can already tell you straight away what the Glazers will do. any of the proceedings that they have to pay to the Qatari delegation of Sheikh Jassim, they'll take it straight out of Manchester United and they'll pay for it, or they'll put it onto Manchester United's bill debt that they already have. They did it with the same thing that they've done, where they hired the Rain Group. Costings to hire the Rain Group and all the lawyers and the financial advisors that they've had working on their takeover deal or investment deal, as it now is with Sajim, 29%, and effectively they put all the costings up, they totaled them, and they just dumped them on Manchester United, and they've pocketed £1 billion for themselves, cash free, and the costs of what it costs to actually run the whole operation for them, they just dumped it on the football club that they've never cared about once. And at the end of the day, the Qataris, in this case, they're just going to look at it from, almost damage limitations. Listen, we didn't win the football club. We gave you the money that you wanted. You didn't take it. That's your fault. That's your problem. We was fair in this deal. And if you're not just going to slam and muddy our name, to the point where whenever we want to go to negotiate for anything, they're not going to take us seriously because they think that we don't have the money, or we're broke, or we don't have any sort of influence because we've been mugged about by 6 people from a family in America, in Tampa Bay, Florida. They're not going to just sit there and lie down. They're not. The Qataris, they made it clear when they came into the process, we'll pay a fair price, but we're not going to be ripped off. They paid what the Glazer family wanted, inevitably, and they still said no. So there can be no complaints from their side of things. They did what was asked of them. So from their point of things, they've done what they did. And at the end of the day, the family chose to go off in a different direction. That's their choice. They can't make them go with them, but they gave them what they wanted. They're now trying to make, and the Qataris are saying that they've now made up a bunch of lies. They put them in court and jurisdiction findings. And for us, it makes us look terrible in the media. It makes our perception and reputation as a nation, as a country, in tatters. And quite clearly, it makes us look like we haven't got any money when we do. We've got a piss pot of like £300 billion worth of assets. Like, the country's rich. They can pay for a football club if they need to pay for one. And as I said before, they went through the right appropriate channels. And I know for a fact anyway, with all of this, there was government involvement. I said that, when the whole process was in. There was people involved in this. And you don't go through the Qatar National Bank, which is the national bank for the whole country, and then you don't go through those avenues and lengths if you don't have government intervention. There clearly is. The Glazers went begging to Nasser Al-Khalifi. People forget that story, asking him to get the guys to bump up their bid.
True.
So this is all a little bit hypocritical from the family. And this is why, if I'm going to pick a side in this anyway, if I had to, I'd believe the bidding group, because I think, honestly, by a lot of Manchester United fans, they sold them everything that they wanted. They said that they'd build a new stadium. They said that they'd build a new training complex. £1 billion will go straight into infrastructure. We're going to develop the men's, youth and women's team, so forth. They basically outlined everything. Sajim, at this point in time right now, he's told the supporters trust what he plans to do, which is bring success to United, but he's not actually penciled in anything that he's going to do. That's the difference. And that's where United fans, if you look at it from this case, they gave them the asking price that they wanted. They didn't accept it. That's the Glazer family's choice. Nobody forced it upon them. But if you're going to sling people in the mud, I'm not surprised if they're going to come calling and bawling back at you and saying that, right, you're not going to slam and slander us in public if we know that we're in the right. So at the end of the day, I think it's a bit of a PR gauge from the family, like what you said, G, where the Qataris could just leak out and say, oh, you know what, we were going to build a 100,000-seater stadium for Manchester United. And then that'll piss Manchester United fans off to the point where they've missed out on that. The Glazers have just looked at it as, well, we're the PR masters. We've got the spin doctor in Neil Ashton who runs all our quotes, and any leaks that come out of Manchester United come through Neil Ashton. That's the way that the Glazers look at it. They are the PR masters. They PR'd the whole thing for a year, and they led every United fan down the dream that they were going to sell the club, and they didn't. So at the end of the day, anything that comes out from the Glazers camp, you don't like as a Manchester United fan. I'd be shocked if anybody should believe it. There's no context or there's no reason why you should believe it because they've lied constantly. They've never had the arse to get on a plane, whether it's unless it suits them to be at an FA Cup final, and then they dump the flight costs on the football club. They've never gave a damn about this club ever, and they never will. So at the end of the day, in terms of the logistics of it, the Qataris, if they want, they can follow through on this and they can sue Manchester United. But it will be the defamation of Manchester United because if the family are proved wrong in this case and the Qataris win the case, you can rest assured whatever damages they put through for, they're just going to dump on Manchester United.
Yeah.
So it will harm Manchester United, not help them. But should it push them to sell the football club? I don't know the whole contracts and the logistics around it, but as far as I was aware, 3 years ago, the Glazer family had everything in legal documentation, and the way they bought the football club in modern day now is illegal. But when they bought it, it was legal. So they're sitting fairly, squeaky clean.
Right, and I think with that we'll wrap up and end. I mean, and this is and ultimately, yeah. I mean, this is the thing ultimately that just taking a turn back to obviously the news with the CEO is that this is why, I have, and I'm sure a lot of United fans have mixed feelings with this news. On the one hand, it is great that United are hiring what seems to be somewhat competent, who's got experience, who hopefully will give this team and this club the success it desperately needs after so long. But on the other hand, the reality is that the Glazers are still in charge, and the Glazers' only real interest, as I think Jarvis in the comments has sort of highlighted too, is the commercial assets, is money, is profit, and they don't really care that much about the club. And right now, when you have all these people being recruited, suddenly now it becomes their problem to bring the success to the football club, not the Glazers, So, and it is, and that's all that we still have to remind ourselves that at the end of the day, the Glazers are still in charge. Thanks everyone for watching. Tom, thank you so much for coming on the stream. I really appreciate it. Hopefully we can come back and do something similar. Maybe another or just a general weekly update regarding what's going on at this football club. With the transfers and with everything. But yeah, I appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks everyone for who's watching in the chat as well. Remember to follow Tom, obviously, on Twitter. He's at TomJournalist1. Make sure you give him a follow on Twitter. We're at TomJournalist1. I'm on Twitter at WeUniteX, as you can see at the bottom here. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe if you're new. Have a nice day, everyone. And cheers. Peace. Peace, peace.
Peace.